Well, hello everyone. If you're not in here yet, you want to come in. Bring your coffee, bring your beverages, and let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin. And I'm especially excited to talk about this topic with you, because you are interested in human flourishing and liberty. And I want to make the case to you that right now, money has become more often a tool of oppression and not so much for human flourishing. And the case that I'm making is a moderate one. I might be provocative, but I only want to have you think about that there might be like a 1 to 5% chance that Bitcoin could usher us into a world of liberty and sound money. And there will be plenty of time for Q&A. It's a complicated topic. I'm sure some of you know a lot about it. Some of you might not know anything about it. But there will be time to also drill me with questions, so definitely keep them ready. But first, let me tell you how I got into all of this. I was always interested in the concept of money, so much so that I've written a book against the Federal Reserve and arguing that the Federal Reserve leads to boom and bust cycles. It leads to government growing way beyond its means, because the government doesn't have to just tax you anymore, they can just print money out of thin air. And that has all kinds of very negative consequences, which then led me to pursue a master's in Austrian economics. There's not many places where you can do that, so I went to Spain to do it in Spanish, admittedly, a language that I don't speak, but it was only half insane because I knew that I could give my presentations in English. But the Austrian school specifically is known for understanding money as something that emerges as a spontaneous order. It is not something that just is willed into existence or that the government created. It comes from human beings. And then I created further study and studied debt and the growth of government and all of that, then dovetailed. And I have received my first Bitcoin in 2013, and since then it has just fascinated me. But at the beginning I also dismissed it and just said, oh, it's just like some fancy internet money, it doesn't make no sense, has no value, but I've learned better. And then Craig also said, I'm the CEO of Students for Liberty, so I also have a different perspective on this as well, like why money is so crucial. So first of all, Students for Liberty, we were founded in 2008, but now we have a volunteer force with thousands of people around the world, and many of them are here actually. So if you see somebody wearing this pin, say hello and ask them about their work. Because the Prometheus Foundation as well as the OSI are very good partners of us, and so we are very excited to be here and to spread the ideas of liberty. What our students are doing is we're giving them the tools and resources to become better advocates for liberty. As you know, universities are breeding grounds for shitty ideas. Pardon my French as a German. And they're breeding grounds, but so we need like a force of people that go out there and spread good ideas. And so we take young people interested in the ideas of liberties, objectivism, sound money, Austrian economics, Chicago School, Milton Friedman, doesn't matter, whatever you're interested in, we let you in and we then train you, and so then you can get out in the world and organize events or organize protests or fight for liberty in your respective backyard. That happens in Arizona, that happens in Zimbabwe, it happens in Michigan, and it happens in Mozambique. So we are right now in 114 countries, and the students just last year alone have organized 1,900 events with over 214,000 people attending those events. And I'm telling you this because I had to wake up of the reality of oppression and how often money is being used as a tool for oppression. Because we have students in places like Venezuela, Lebanon, Turkey, and Argentina. Those kids, their parents have lost everything due to inflation. And right now, we're living in the United States where we have 8.3% inflation, and it's also hurting us here. It's a global phenomenon at this point. But money is also being controlled by the government, which means that you can find yourself into a situation where you lose everything. You think right now that the money that you have in your bank account is yours. It's not. Only because you're trusting a bank that is controlled by the government, you have access to it. And if they don't like you, and if they don't like you what you say, they can take it away from you. Very easily. And that cannot only happen in like some authoritarian country and you say like, oh, I don't need to care about that. It can also happen here. Just a few months ago, we've seen what happened in Canada. People had their natural born right to protests against the government been taken away from them by just like all of their bank accounts were frozen. They didn't have access to their money anymore. Imagine that for a second. What would you do if you don't have access to your Visa card anymore? For your Bank of America card? You cannot sell your stocks to pay your rent or your mortgage. It has happened, and it's happening all around the world. This individual here that I'm showing here, his name is Piotr. He has one of our slogans on his t-shirt, it's peace, love, liberty. And he is arrested for documenting election fraud in the country. He just recorded it, and then he was taken to prison. And this happened to him in 5 times, not only because of election fraud, but because of peaceful protests and other things. And there were thousands of people like him, and in many cases, those activists, especially when you were rising to some level of notoriety, the government shut your bank account down. Organizations were fighting for free speech, for transparent government, for smaller government, their bank accounts were shutting down. Fiat money, fiat means from Latin by decree, by the force of the government. We're all using the dollar, which is, or whatever, the rupee or whatever currency you're using. It's money that is only allowed you can only use this because the government says so. But at this point, this is problematic. Over 1.4 billion people live under 10% inflation or more. Every day becoming more people. As I've mentioned, your money is not yours. And here in the United States, just in the last 2 years, the money supply was increased by 38%. And that cannot be good money. Money is just a tool for communicating value to one another. I buy a coffee, I value the coffee more than the $3. Or because of inflation, it's like, and you go to Starbucks, it's like freaking $6 or whatever. Right? But in that exchange, where you exchange with another human being, you're exchanging value, but suddenly there's a third party that says like, the value that you have to offer is going down, 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 and down. That's not sustainable. All right, there we go. And as an economist, I want to just throw some graphs at it to show you the problem. Because right now, you can see on the right-hand side the amount of GDP in percentage that is being used right now in order, which is like bigger than the global GDP. Meaning, we have 3 times as much debt in the world than productive capacity to produce something. And now if you think like interest rates are going up, you will never be able to pay it back. So the only solution for governments is to print more money and to make us all poorer. So, we know that there's good money out there. And Ayn Rand talks about this. She writes in Atlas Shrugged, money is the principle that men who wish to deal with one another must deal by trade and give value for value. That would be good money. But if you've met somebody from Venezuela, ask them how easy it is to exchange anything. When they're getting a salary, they have to run out in that very minute to go to the store to buy like the very little goods that they are, because like 2 hours later, the money would be worth 0. And this is an experience that's happened over and over and over again in human history. And this is because we are not self-sovereign. We don't have sovereign money because we have dedicated the power of the printing press as well as like what good money is to government. And of course, government screws it up. But there's hope. So first of all, let me explain very simply, and we can dive in the Q&A and like more of the technicalities, what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency that can be transferred peer-to-peer. I could right now, which is very powerful, use my phone to transact with anyone in your room, in this room. You just have to download an app, and I can send it to you. It will reach you within seconds, and you don't have to give your data, you don't have to give your email address or your name. I can do this with somebody from Japan, and I can do this with somebody from America, and it's completely trustless, borderless, and nobody can stop me. And only once you have done this, you realize the power of it. Because let's imagine it's like I don't know, you had like a good night with your friends and you forgot your wallet and you wanted to pay them back, and they're like, was a huge bill, and they want to have the back immediately. But it's a Sunday night, it's 2 a.m., what do? You cannot send that money to them instantaneously, right? Or if your friend is like actually like in Japan or something, you cannot do it. You have to wait until the bank opens, you have to wait like several days until it arrives. This is instantaneous peer-to-peer currency. And it is protected by the biggest security network, digital security network the world has ever seen. The encryption power behind Bitcoin is much bigger than the encryption power of the CIA, any kind of intelligence service. It's the biggest, most protected network in the world. So let's go into some basics. Because you might have questions in your mind like, oh, why does it even have value? It's just like digitally, you know? It's just like maybe World of Warcraft money. Like, why does it have value? So first of all, it is scarce. For human beings to value anything, it must be scarce. For instance, right now, we all have access to breathing air. We're not paying for it, right? But if you go diving and you don't have access to air, you will be paying for air, and you will get a tank on your back. So if something is completely abundant, you're not going to pay for it. So something needs to be scarce. And typically what money is the scarcest, most valued good in a specific geographic area. So for instance, if you go to like a prisoners of war camp, cigarettes are very scarce, and they will be traded. They will become money. And we have seen salt was money at some point, or shells. So can Bitcoin become money? That's a big question. I want to make that case. So there will be only ever 21 million Bitcoin. Very scarce. Right now, 19 million of those have already been issued. And we know exactly how many Bitcoin will be issued tomorrow, in 1 week, 4 years from now, as well as 100 years from now. Because the supply schedule is algorithmically determined, which makes it very different from fiat money. You have no idea what the inflation rate will be next week. You know that with Bitcoin. And you also, and let me be very clear about this. I want to argue for Bitcoin being a strategic tool to accomplish a freer society, to live the values that objectivism shares with so many other ideas within the pro-liberty world. So for me, it's a strategic point of view. I'm not want to encourage you to buy it. That's absolutely up to you. You should do your own research. Don't listen to me. It takes some time to understand this. For me, it's most important. It's a tool to accomplish human freedom. And the good thing is also that the early Bitcoiners and the people that have started it, their ideology was rooted in cypherpunk ideology, which was very much focused on the sovereignty of the individual, on privacy, and other themes classical liberals are very interested in. They also were very often libertarians, and they were very steeped in the Austrian school. So there is a lot of interactions there. So now let me go to a slide where I try to explain to you why I think Bitcoin is superior money. Because you have to ask yourself the question, like, what is money? Typically, it has three functions, right? It's a medium of exchange, it's a store of value, and right now, the dollar becomes less of a store of value, and it's the unit of account. So you can see, like, okay, I'm getting $2,000 this week, and I have to pay my bills, and it's like $1,000, so it's the unit of account. Bitcoin is maybe a store of value, sometimes a medium of exchange, not so much a unit of account. I mean, I know people that live on a Bitcoin standard. They don't have any fiat money whatsoever. It's possible, but there are few people like this. However, we know what good money is, what attributes money has to have to become a money. Because, for instance, milk will never become money, right? Because if you want to transact something next week, it will be bad and nobody will take it anymore. So there's certain attributes. So let's go through them. Now we have Bitcoin there, we have gold there, and we have fiat money there. And I forgot to put the quote, the source on this. This is not from me. This is by a fantastic article I would all encourage you to read. It's the bullish case of Bitcoin. Very interesting. I don't want to go through all of them, but you can see that for money to be good, it has to be durable, right? Milk is not durable. Bitcoin is pretty durable. As long as the internet and electricity exists, it will be fine. However, you can lose the keys to your Bitcoins, and it has happened already many, many times. Right now, there's expected that roughly 30 to 40% of all Bitcoins are lost permanently. So it's even scarcer than it is. because you are self-sovereign, which means you can have the keys, the algorithmic keys to your own Bitcoin. So you're your own bank, but if you lose the keys to your vault, it's gone. Gold, very durable, right? It has existed for millennia. You can take like some gold coins that were used under the pharaohs, and you can melt it down and make it into gold. Very good. Fiat money, not so much, right? Because like our cash goes away, and fiat money generally also typically loses a lot of value. Is it portable? Fiat money is not portable all that much, right? If you happen to have the dollar, it's pretty good. It's pretty fungible. You can exchange it against other currencies, but it's also pain. If you have to travel to like one country, often you have to exchange your dollars versus euros, then versus the Czech krona, and it's very, very tiresome. So it's not that portable, it's not borderless. Bitcoin is portable and completely borderless. Nobody can stop you doing it. And gold, while it is somewhat portable, if you had the problem, and all of you are very smart, you love liberty, so all of you will become filthy rich. If you had to think about trying to move $10 million in gold, good luck with that. Trying to secure that, trying to keep it stable, it will be very expensive. Then, skipping some here, is it verifiable? Gold can be faked. We have seen many stories coming out of China that gold bars were fake, and many other countries as well. So it's not that verifiable, and fiat money can also be faked. Bitcoin, since it's a pseudo-anonymous open ledger, so you can just imagine Bitcoin being this Excel sheet where all kinds of transactions are in there from the beginning of Bitcoin, which was in 2009, to today, and all of these transactions are listed, and it's public. Everyone can verify that. So it's absolutely verifiable. I've actually, I'm running it on my computer as well as on a separate device where I'm verifying every new transactions that's being done within Bitcoin. Is it divisible? Bitcoin can be divided by 100 million. Gold can be divided also, but yeah, try to pay for a slice of pizza with gold. Fiat money, you can do that a little bit. But then also, is it scarce? Bitcoin is absolutely scarce. Gold is growing traditionally 2% every single year. And fiat money is not scarce at all, as we know. It can be created ex nihilo. Now, established history is important because for something to have value, people have to trust it. Bitcoin is very young. It's weird. It's hard to understand. It takes a lot of studying to wrap your head around it. So, and it doesn't have an established history. Gold, perfect, has been around for over 5,000 years, has been used by every country on earth. But fiat money is a new phenomenon because it used to be that at least fiat money was backed by silver or gold. And in the 1970s, as we know, we got rid of the gold standard entirely, and now it's not backed by anything. And then is it censorship resistant, right? With fiat money, I've told you the story of Piotr, right? We had also activists in Nigeria that were protesting the police brutality, where often the police went there, kidnapped people, put a gun to their head, forced money from them. This was like a government-sanctified police group called SARS. During the end SARS protests, a lot of these groups where their bank accounts were shut and they couldn't receive any kind of donations to continue their work. Not censorship resistant. Gold, you might remember in 1933, just by executive order, not even the Congress or the Senate voted on that, the president said, now, citizens in the United States, you're not allowed to own gold anymore. You have to exchange this for a fixed price to the government. And if you keep gold, you will be thrown into jail. Happened in India as well. Not censorship resistant. Bitcoin is banned like every other week and continues to function. It's been banned in China. It's been banned in India. It's been banned in Pakistan. Nigeria tried to ban it. Funny enough, senators in Nigeria talked about Bitcoin and they were complaining that they were not able to really shut it down. Yes, governments can make it very hard for anyone to acquire Bitcoin. They can force banks to say hey, you're not allowed to exchange your money versus Bitcoin, and it makes it much harder. But it's peer-to-peer. It's completely permissionless. Nobody can stop me from making a transaction. And if I find somebody, for instance, let's say a person in China that wants to give me money for Bitcoin, and I agree to that, I can just send it to them. And really, Bitcoin already helps the struggle for liberty. Those are all colleagues of mine. So I've already talked about Nigeria. This is my colleague here, Olumayoa. He lives in a town southwest in Nigeria, and right now they have 16% inflation for many, many years, and it's going up. They're not allowed to hold dollars, and they are also cracking down on the black market rate, so they cannot even have access to the black market. They have to exchange their currency to dollars on a fixed rate, which is very, very bad for them. So his salary actually that I'm paying him has been going down because of that. Now, how do you save for yourself, for your family, for the future in such an environment? How can you have hope that you can build a house or you can provide for your 2 children and pay for their college if like 2 years from now or 5 years from now, all of the money that you have now will be cut in half? And in some countries, it's not cut in half after 5 years, it's cut in half after a year, or it's cut in half after a few months. Now, he has discovered Bitcoin many, many years ago, and while Bitcoin is volatile, and we can definitely talk about that, I'm not trying to deny that, it tends to be volatile upwards instead of just volatile downwards. And so he has placed his trust in this, and so far, he has much more hope for the future because he is using it as a savings technology. Another example, how Bitcoin is already changing lives and saving lives. A colleague there in blue, she belongs to a Muslim minority in India. And right now, they are being targeted quite a bit. We don't hear about that in the news, but they are often yelled on the streets. They're being threatened to put into prison. Many of her family members already have left the country because they fear for their lives. And all of that is happening, but I can tell you that she is sleeping better because she knows that if she has to leave the country from 1 minute to the other, she can take all of her belongings and all of her money with her by just remembering 12 words in her head, which is the key to her Bitcoin. Try to do that if you have tens of thousands of dollars. Try to escape with gold. Somebody will steal it from you. Try to do it with stacks of money. They will take it away from your airport. And this is happening all over and over again. We have tons of stories of people in Pakistan doing this, in Afghanistan doing this, and also in Ukraine, which is the next story. Mikhail is an alumni of our programs, and he used to fight for liberty, and I think he ran a think tank there in Ukraine. But now he is an emergency response medic, because that's the life that he's living now. But many of his colleagues were not able to get funds, especially at the beginning. They could not get all of that money in, and it was really weird to send money there, and it would take a lot of time, but they needed medicine and everything right now. Bitcoin transactions, seconds, instantly. And they can then just transfer it into their local currency. So we are actually using Bitcoin quite a bit. We have 71 full-time staffers, but right now 18 of them choose to be paid in Bitcoin. Because it's faster, it's often cheaper, and it works. And they're transferring it, of course, to fiat money locally. Some of them they're saving. I don't know. I don't care what they're doing, but it's already being useful. And in the last few years, over 300 of our students have organized events about this. And you can see here, sometimes they're doing fun stuff as well. This is the Czech Central Bank, and they just put the Bitcoin logo on it, and as well as Students for Liberty logo. So trolling government is always fun. So now, is Bitcoin emergent money? I've already mentioned that it has 3 different functions, but I would argue to you, don't reject Bitcoin as a potential money just because it's not a medium of exchange yet. And yes, I've bought Bitcoin. Yes, I've bought coffee with Bitcoin. It's possible. Would I recommend it? Do I do it every day? No, because I see it more as a store of value. It has to go through stages. So first a store of value, then it becomes medium of exchange, then unit of account. And that process can take decades. And Bitcoin is already growing faster than the internet. Over 120 million people are estimated to be using just Bitcoin. Also, let me add, I'm only talking about Bitcoin because there's probably 16,000 other cryptocurrencies out there. So you might be asking, okay, why is he not talking about cryptocurrency X or Monero or Dogecoin like Elon Musk, because there's a cool puppy on there or something. While there might be some of these projects that are interesting, there might be a good business application, there might be the next Airbnb, or there might be an Amazon. None of them have the credibility, the history of potentially being money, because Bitcoin has been attacked relentlessly for 13 years. It's one of the biggest honeypots out there. If you can hack Bitcoin, If you can show that you can create Bitcoin ex nihilo, out of nothing, you can crash the whole market and you can short it and you can make billions and billions of dollars of money. Governments don't like it. They have not been able to shut it down. And nobody has been able to change the monetary policy of 21 million. And why that is? Because there is hundreds of thousands of nodes out there, and those nodes are validating the integrity of the blockchain. They're enforcing the code. I'm enforcing the code at home with a normal laptop. Nobody can stop me of doing this. And the beautiful thing is nobody can stop 10,000 people simultaneously to shut down their computers. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And it has been tried over and over and over again. So it will take some time. And it's an emergent good, and so therefore it's very speculative, which explains all the volatility. And it's a spontaneous, it's a good like a spontaneous order. Law, as well as money, as well as language, are results of spontaneous orders, which means nobody has said like, hey, we will create language now. It is something that came about by human action over millennia, but not by human design. While of course Bitcoin was designed, they could never foresee like what it has become, and that there's like now millions of people interacting on this network. Nobody was forced to do so. So, going back to the strategy question, how can we limit the size of government? By constitutions? Constitutions are great, specifically one in the United States here. It's pretty robust. But if you would be able to revive the people who written the Constitution, or the Declaration of Independence, and sent them to freaking Washington, D.C., do you think they would say that the Constitution has worked? Is voting effective? Mathematically, you have more chance to win a lottery than to cause a different outcome in an election. So, not that effective, and right now, we're living, especially in the United States, you can choose between the same thing with like different degrees of evil. You can vote with your feet, right? That's tough to do though, especially if you have like a family, you can move somewhere else. But does that change the outcome of the country necessarily? I mean, if millions and millions and millions of people are leaving, sure, but that has happened in Venezuela. It's one of the biggest humanitarian crises, like millions of people have left, now stranded in Colombia and so forth. The government is still awful. Maybe you want to become part of the political process. All right, good luck with that. Maybe we can brainstorm like how many principal politicians we know that are able to make systematic change towards the ideas that we care about here. Some of them are good, some of them make like some marginal change, but right now the trajectory is one where there's 3 times more debt in the world than there's productive capacity. Protest, sure, they can work, but they're risky. Some of us are a little bit, maybe we don't want to risk that, or we have kids, or, the stakes are high. One answer is, of course, spreading rational philosophy, which we're doing here. And so what the Objective Standard Institute is doing is helping because it changes people's minds and maybe they think differently. And it doesn't mean that they have to become politicians, but you have a choice every day to make liberty one of your life goals. And you can do that with all kinds of different ways. You can become a journalist. You can become an author. You can become a philosopher. You can start a business that creates more choices for human beings. All of these things are important. Students for Liberty in this regard is helping towards that. It's a long run focus, but now, after only 13 years, we have people who are vice ministers. We have like 91 people have started nonprofits here in the United States and around the world that fight now for liberty full time. We have people that started multi-million-dollar businesses and giving back to society by like exchanging value and all that stuff. But I would say Bitcoin is one of those things that you should consider as a tool for human flourishing. Because I would argue, if you fix the money, you fix the world. Because Bitcoin stands for the separation of money and state. We all understand how important it was to separate religion from government, church from state. Now it's time to separate money from the state, and Bitcoin is the best shot at achieving that. Thank you very much. We have plenty of questions, so 30 minutes, and just wanted to see like what you guys have in mind. Yes, sir.
So my question's about Bitcoin and it being a store of value. So you might be familiar with Carl Menger talking about the origin of money and money being the most marketable commodity. And so my question is, what do you have to say against someone who says that in order to function as money, as a store of value, that thing needs to have some utility apart from being a medium of exchange?
Right.
Like gold can be used as jewelry. Other things other than as a medium of exchange, like the cigarettes you were talking about in the prison, they can be used as something other than a medium of exchange. I was wondering, does Bitcoin have that? And if not, can it function as money without that?
Right. So the argument is like, okay, can you have something that is money that doesn't have like an alternative use? Like gold is shiny, you can put it in your teeth, you can do fun stuff with it, right? Looks good. Therefore, it's valued by people. I mean, the clearest example is we are having something right now that we're using, right, that has no value whatsoever. I mean, the government says it's valuable. Oh, it's actually euro, cool. Find money in my pockets. So government says this has value, but I don't know if you have a peso here, right? Like a Bolivian from Venezuela, there's no value. So value is something that is subjectively evaluated by people. So Bitcoin has value because it's superior to monetary properties, and people believe it can benefit them. It also has value because you can instantaneously exchange value across time and space, permissionless, in a censorship-resistant way. So I would argue that Bitcoin is 100% monetary premium. It's only money and nothing else. But I don't see why that should be a problem. Because right now we have the dollar and it's just money and nothing else. And still it's useful. It's corrupted, it's problematic, but it works. But thanks for your question.
A very large one, which I participate in, is Ethereum. And I was wondering if you could talk about the attributes of each and how they differ.
Very good. We have a gentleman here that knows cryptocurrencies and has already have some, and he's talking about Ethereum. Ethereum is, for market capitalization, the second biggest cryptocurrency. However, it is very different from Bitcoin. So ask yourself, if you're looking for money, do you want to own a money that you don't know what the monetary policy is 5, 10 years, 20 years from now? Or do you rather have something where you know the monetary policy? With Ethereum, you don't know that. Ethereum has changed its monetary policy like 5 or 6 times, and it looks like a 5-year-old painted it with a crayon. So I would not put my money behind this. And why can it be changed? Because there are people in charge of Ethereum that make those decisions. So therefore, I have to trust the people in charge of Ethereum. I don't trust people with money. I mean, I'm studying money for like decades now, so I don't trust government of it, so why should I trust Vitalik Buterin with my money? Now, does it might have like some other good applications? Sure. Yeah, decentralized finance, all these fancy things, NFTs, JPEGs, sounds great. I'm not interested in that. I want to fix the world, and therefore I want to fix money. Ethereum is not believable money whatsoever. Also, additionally, Ethereum is very centralized. Right now, there's hundreds of thousands of people that are running Bitcoin nodes, and you can do it with your laptop. You don't need like a lot of resources for this. Just internet, and like the program that you can download on bitcoin.org. That's it. With Ethereum, they only have the things that are validating the blockchain. They are only an AWS service, Amazon Web Service, because they're so big. They take gigabytes over gigabytes over gigabytes. So therefore, if you want to shut down Amazon, or you can shut down these specific servers, you could. You can shut down the Ethereum Foundation. You can imprison Vitalik Buterin and all of the coders of it. Good luck with doing this with Bitcoin. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I was wondering, in a world where we are moving towards the concept of like digital passports and more control in a digital realm where the government is heading in that direction, is there a way that Bitcoin is secure against that? Because if the government shuts down your access to the internet because you don't have a certain viewpoint, or if you can't have access to a phone or an app because of that, is Bitcoin secure against something like that?
So Bitcoin relies on internet access and electricity. And that is a prerequisite. Now, you can still hold your Bitcoin and you still have your keys, and nobody will take it away from you. So if you have like, let's say 50% of your net worth in Bitcoin, and then the government doesn't like you, and they shut down the internet because there's like elections, as it happens sometimes, like most recently also happened in the Congo, doesn't matter. Once you have internet again, you have still access to it. Can you then initiate transactions? No. But that would be the same case if with banks, right? If they don't like you, they shut down the banks. If they don't like the internet, you would not be able to go to your to initiate like an online transaction. So is it entirely foolproof? No, but you can also theoretically, and there's already tools of this, you can create like your own satellite that goes to the internet without the local service providers. And you can already buy goods of this. So if you're depends on your level of paranoia or which country you're living in, because paranoia sometimes becomes like your fact of life. You can still have a satellite and you can still transact with people like this. Theoretically also, you can put Bitcoin into physical form. So this is also a very important point. Most people buy Bitcoin and just hold it on Coinbase or some exchange. That ignores the key function of Bitcoin, which is you becoming self-sovereign. You can make decisions yourself. Now you're trusting a third party again. So if somebody shuts down Coinbase, you're screwed. You will not have access to your coins. And that has happened many different times. So I would say, like, yes, there's a risk. You can hedge against it. It depends, like, and the more money you have in Bitcoin, the more creative you can become. But you can theoretically download all of this on a so-called cold wallet where you hold your keys, which is not bigger than this, and you can carry it with you anywhere. If you don't trust that, you can also split your access to the Bitcoin with other people so that different people have to sign it. Let's say you, like on my Bitcoin, my wife has a key, then like my mother would have a key, and then who lives in a different country, and then somebody else has a key, and only when all three people agree, then you can make a transaction. So even if they catch you and force you to say like, oh, what's your key, they will still not have access to your Bitcoin. So there's a lot of different security paradigms right now being created, especially for people that have a lot of these resources or are concerned about that enables them to still have access to it. Yes, sir.
Well, I have a question. You know, whenever Bitcoin can also be seen as an investment, and also, like, I would like to know, like, would you give me an advice on how to learn when to invest and when to withdraw some money, and how can we learn that?
So you're asking, because it's volatile, you want to know like when to invest in it?
Yeah.
Okay, not going to answer that. I've bought when Bitcoin was at over $60,000. I'm buying Bitcoin every single day, $24 worth of it, every single day. I see this as a long-run solution. I'm saving in this currency. And I'm making a bet of it, that more and more people realize that this is superior money, right? Because I understand it and I know where fiat money is trending, right? And Bitcoin has theoretically infinite value because because fiat money has no bottom. So, but there's volatility, right? Because I said it's already speculation, and right now it's very correlated to tech stocks specifically. So we just had like a drop of, what was it, 76%? Is that scary? Yeah. But stuff that's worthwhile doesn't come easy, right? And that's easier said than done, but I'm not trying to time the market, right? I study markets, I love them, but I would not know like when to invest. And I already think in my mind, like each time when I'm buying Bitcoin, like it feels like it's going down afterwards. But I can tell you that over years, Bitcoin right now is like growing 150% a year in average. So you can have like some years that are going downward, and that just means you can buy more of it, and then at some point it hopefully goes up. However, it all depends on what other people value. But I believe where the world is headed, more and more people looking for alternatives to fiat money. And I hope that you give it a shot and that you think about it as well, so that you can see this as a tool for human flourishing, or also something that can be a hedge for you, because keep this in mind as well. Every world currency ever has a life, like a shelf life of around 100 years. The dollar is the world currency for roughly 100 years right now. So what happens if the dollar is not the world currency anymore, or it hyperinflates? What's your plan for that? You can buy gold, you can buy real estate, and so forth, but it's very, very tough. I'll give you an example. Like in Argentina in the 1970s, you could have been the best investor ever. You had like the the best portfolio. You invested in real estate, in stocks, in bonds, in gold. You're completely hedged. Everything was expressed in Argentinian pesos, though. The best trade you could have done is buying a superior money. If you just would have bought the dollar, you would have done so much better than if you would have invested in there. And I would say people will realize that the better unit of account, the better units to compare this with, the better money is Bitcoin. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I have a question about Bitcoin network efficiency, because you didn't mention that there may be problem with quick transactions, because Bitcoin per day has as many transactions as Visa or MasterCard system within few minutes. So sometimes it's very difficult to get money immediately. You have to wait some time. Maybe you need to pay high fees. And okay, there are solutions like Lightning Network, but it's centralized Bitcoin, for example. And my question is, what do you think about solution which is middle way? Although Bitcoin eliminates people's needs for banks, but what if banks treated Bitcoin literally like digital gold? So banks used to contain gold, and after some transaction sessions, these banks exchanged gold between themselves. And right now, banks would exchange Bitcoin. So for example, I may buy a book from you, pay you in dollars with card, but on banking level, on the second layer of the banking system, our banks are exchanging Bitcoin. So do you believe in this solution that we can bring some middle way, or it has to be just elimination of all banking system and focusing on private wallets?
Okay. Let me address the first question and see if I can get to the second, because there's like tons of other people behind you. No, that's good. So he's saying Bitcoin is slow, and it cannot really compete with the transaction from for instance, the Visa card or MasterCard. Now, the dollar is also very slow. Have you ever heard about the Fed wire? The Fed wire is happening every single week, where all of the transactions between all of the different major banks are cleared on a centralized ledger at the Federal Reserve. A few months ago, that whole system went down. We didn't hear about it, but it's possible. Very slow. Transactions are only confirmed once a week, and the system still works. Why? Because you have layered solutions. You have banks on top of the dollar, then you have Visas and MasterCards on top of banks, then you have all kinds of other different tools on it, and that's the same with Bitcoin. For instance, right now, Bitcoin, normally every 10 minutes, there's a new block in the blockchain created where you have new transactions coming in. And you can have like a few thousand transactions in there. It's not much. However, you can build on top of this, and this already exists, what he has referred to as the Lightning Network, which is peer-to-peer, and that's instantaneously. And what's that? Yeah. And you can actually have it on your phone, and if you're interested, then you can also get what my wife is pointing out. You can easily also, it's like slightly different, but you can also get like Bitcoin right now by like, this is a debit card. It's linked to fiat money, but I'm spending it and I'm getting Bitcoin back actually. So it's already very useful in this regard, but in terms of transactions, the Lightning Network is already working. It has already like tens of billions of dollars within it, but it will take time to grow, and there might be different solutions in the future. But money emerges as a layered good, so I'm like less concerned about Bitcoin itself being slow, because that's actually a feature, not a bug. Because if you had like every second in millions of transactions, that would be 100 megabytes of big, nobody would be able to validate it at home, because the blockchain will become so big that again you have to trust third parties to enforce it for you. Right now you don't have to trust, you can verify. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. A very basic question. You mentioned earlier that you are one of those who do the validating of transactions at home.
Yeah.
I assume by that you mean some form of double checking. Okay, what specific facts are you double checking when you validate, and what is it you look for? How do you do that?
Right. It's all done by software, right? I'm running the source code of Bitcoin. And so what it does is, in terms of encryption, it's costly to encrypt something. You have to expend energy and computational power. But if you have the key, you can easily see what comes out of it. You can easily see if this was correct. And it's the same with the node, right? The node right now is probably like 600 gigabytes long. And what it does is like there's like a miner has found a new block. Every 10 minutes there's a new block, right? And the miner has found a new block because they have solved a very, very complicated computational problem. That's the reason why you see like huge machines and that like Bitcoin is using like, 0.8% of the world's energy. Which is not nothing, but it's also not nothing to worry about, but we can address that. So it's easy to insure it and create new Bitcoin, but it's very easy to validate it. So what the software is doing, the node is just checking if there's new Bitcoin in there, have they complied to all of the source code? Is the code right? And do the Bitcoin correspond to all of the chain? So for instance, if you create like every 10 minutes, 6.25 Bitcoin gets created. If suddenly like there's a block that says like, oh, I've got 10 Bitcoin, they know that's mathematically and by the algorithm impossible, it will be rejected. I'm validating peer-to-peer transactions. Every single transaction comes into the block and that will be validated by the software.
What is it the software is double checking? What facts?
The integrity of the source code. So everything is done by what's laid out, like how Bitcoin should function, which means every 10 minutes, 6.25 new Bitcoin. It means the specific transaction size. It means that you have to have a sender and a recipient. It means that Bitcoin that you are spending has not been spent somewhere else, right? So that you don't have double spend. All of these things are just confirmed by it, but I cannot go into detail too much about like the coding stuff. I'm an economist, I'm not a coder, but there are sophisticated explanation about that if you want to really dig into this. It's pretty sophisticated system that's based on several decades of research within cryptography. Bitcoin came not out of anything. Bitcoin just combined things that came 15 years prior. So this has been already in the development for a long time, but great question, thank you.
Good afternoon, Doctor. My name is Cesar Cuello, and I am from Venezuela, so I do understand a lot of things that you have mentioned today. I would also like to start to saying thank you, Sean, for your time and your explanations that you've given. And I do have two quick questions. The first one, and they obviously come out of ignorance, but the first one, to give you an example, with the US currency, let's say that you have an X amount of money deposited in a bank. There's kind of a safety net in this country that is given by the Federal Deposit Insurance Commission. Yep. Corporation. Is there any safe net when it comes to Bitcoin? That's question number one. Question number two, that and the fact that if Bitcoin can be hacked. I know that today the argument it is that it's protected by blockchain, but as everybody in this room, we all are forward thinkers and future thinkers. So maybe in the future it could be hacked. Well, that's why I ask about the safety net. And the second question is the involvement of governments, for example, in El Salvador, it's now Bitcoin is being accepted as currency. Do you see that as a threat of the integrity of Bitcoin? Because in Venezuela, we have also created a cryptocurrency, which I don't encourage anybody in this room to buy, which is Petro. And I just want to have your input when government gets involved with cryptocurrency. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Gracias a tu. You might have detected it slightly that I'm not the biggest fan of government, so I wouldn't trust what they were doing. And I know that there's like so-called central bank digital currencies being discussed, right? Where you put the dollar and make it digital, and it's like all fast and stuff. It's still the dollar. It's still people in the Federal Reserve then determine what the value of that is. So yeah, don't buy the one in Venezuela and don't believe what the governments will tell you. That's one thing. Is there a safety net for Bitcoin? Nah. It's you're self-sovereign, which means liberty and responsibility, right? Both of these things. You can hold your own keys, but if you forget them or if you lose them, that's your problem, right? But that's also the power of it, because you don't have to trust anyone besides yourself. It's trustless, right? You don't have to rely on any third party, and that is entirely unique. And I would also argue that deposit insurance is, there's many economic arguments why this might also not be efficient in a free market, and it can lead to all kinds of different problems, but that's too much of a nuanced discussion. I think I answered 2 out of 3, so that I think that's good enough. Yes, sir.
Hello. You mentioned Monero, and the biggest thing that has, that Bitcoin doesn't, is privacy by default on your transactions, monetary transactions. I was just wondering what your if you think there's value in privacy by default.
I love privacy. I would love that Bitcoin would be entirely private. I started pseudo-anonymous. It's not anonymous because you can verify all of the blockchain, all of the transactions, right? So you don't know who's sending what, but you can see that it's happening and how much. Now, with sophisticated analysis, you can try to narrow it down. Okay, which wallet is this? Where did it come from? So they can theoretically find out who you are. With Monero, which is another cryptocurrency, everything is completely secretive. Sounds great. However, there's a trade-off between privacy and verifiability. If you don't know what transactions are being made, if you cannot verify how many Moneros are out there, like how can you trust the monetary policy? Maybe somebody goes in there and changes something in the code, you will be never ever to detect. I can just write like a very simple command into my node and it spits out, okay, the max cap is 21 million. In the year 2140, all 21 million will be mined. Tomorrow we'll be mining this much, and so forth and so on. So if you want to have absolute privacy, you cannot have verifiability. And for money, I think it's more important to be able to, that you can verify it and that you know what it is instead of like the privacy aspect. But that's a trade-off. But it's a great question. Yes, sir.
Hello. I keep hearing people and yourself mention banks this, banks that, and I wonder where I am sometimes. But because of that, I'm asking, because the government, in a free society, would a bank be a problem for any good individual? Probably not. So I'm asking, what use would Bitcoin be in a free society? Like, why on earth would this exist?
I guess I failed with my presentation because the people would opt out of the fiat money and choose a better money. So this could become maybe the next global currency that people are using. People living on a Bitcoin standard already right now. People make the decision that they don't want to interact with the fiat money system and they're just transacting in that money. The more people are doing this, the more we're moving closer to a world where governments are forced to also use the money that the rest of the population wants to use. The more people are opting out of the fiat money system, the less control government has over the money supply. They can still change the money supply, obviously, but they cannot manipulate it infinitely because nobody's using that anymore. Right? We have seen many times over and over again where, especially Venezuelans would know that, where they're trying to hold everything in dollars and people are opting out of the system. And the same is now possible with Bitcoin, but on a much larger scale. So I don't know how it exactly looks like how to get there, right? It's like way too complex to predict that. And I think no classical liberal would say that they can see the future. However, due to the fact that it's my superior money, I believe that the world could move to more of a Bitcoin standard. You brought up El Salvador. That's a question that I forgot to address. I'm not a fan of dictators. I don't trust the guy, right? It's nice that they have this experiment and we can look at it. I don't think it's good that they force people to use it. I want it to be voluntary. The beauty about Bitcoin is it's neutral. Everybody can opt in. You don't have to use it, right? But he made it mandatory for some people, which I think is completely antithetical to the ethos of this. Now, but it might be like there's like another African country that recently said that Bitcoin is legal tender. There might be more countries doing this at some point, especially the countries that right now are using the dollar, are dependent on the dollar, right? They might say like, why do I exchange my goods and services to get the dollar right now that is losing value every single day? The world right now gives the United States cheap energy, cheap products, everything, because they think that the dollar is worth more than what they're getting for it. But people are waking up for this. I hate Putin, but he just had a speech that you will not see in the mainstream media. He just had a speech laying this out and saying, why would we continue to provide goods and services for the United States when they don't give us anything in return besides something that just loses value, which just has increased by 38% just in the last 2 years? So more and more people will wake up to that. Maybe some governments will adapt it, but I don't care about that because we already see individuals adapting this. They're opting out of tyranny because it's already a tool for human flourishing right now. It's already like a solution for many businesses too, especially in developing countries. And maybe at some point, government will be forced to adopt it. Will this be within the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years? I don't know, but I'm betting on that I will see this in my lifetime, and that's the reason why I believe in it. Yes, sir. And we have like, how many minutes left? I think like 1 or 2 questions. 2, yeah.
Hello. Bitcoin, I don't think the general population sees it as we do with principles. Like we separate it being a private currency and the state currency. I think that they see it more like a digital currency, like something they don't mind about. They don't mind that much about privacy and other things.
Yep.
And now the CBDCs are coming, the central bank digital currencies. And I think that the government is going to try to equal Bitcoin and CBDCs.
Sure.
How do you think we can fight that government propaganda and still be able to difference Bitcoin and CBDCs?
I mean, the obvious difference is that Bitcoin is something that nobody can control. You can verify it for yourself. Nobody's changing the monetary policy. It's set in stone. CBDCs will be the opposite. Actually, interestingly enough, if you have a central bank digital currency, CBDC, and it would be like on a public ledger, you could see what all the banks are doing. Wouldn't that be interesting, right? We know how much like money laundering is going on, right, within banks. Deutsche Bank, Bear Stearns, all of these banks have been sued out of oblivion every single year. Not enough, but like they're still making a lot of money. If that were always public, I'm not entirely sure they would be able to like bail out all of these businesses all the time. So I think you're asking a question like, okay, like what if nobody cares? You're absolutely right. If nobody cares, it requires people to discuss it, to learn about it, and to see it as an option. But I think I've already know like many people in developing countries that have very high inflation. They don't understand anything about Bitcoin, but they were desperate to find something else. They were looking for it. And I think with 8.3% inflation here in the United States as well, more and more people will try to figure out like, okay, what can I do to protect myself and my family? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your questions.